if everything the Western world thought it knew about Iran's military restraint was dangerously, catastrophically wrong? What if right now, somewhere in the scorching desert expanse of Saudi Arabia, an American military installation, one that serves as the backbone of U.S. power projection across the entire Middle East, is burning? What if the unthinkable has already happened and the world is only just beginning to understand the terrifying magnitude of what it means? You are about to find out. Stay right here, because what you are about to hear will change the way you see this region forever. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we are diving deep into one of the most seismic military events to shake the Middle East in recent memory: the Iranian missile strike on Prince Sultan Air Base, the crown jewel of American military presence in Saudi Arabia. This is not a drill. This is not speculation. This is a full-scale military confrontation that intelligence analysts have been warning about for years, and it has now exploded into terrifying reality. Buckle up, because this report is going to take you inside the operation, inside the war rooms, and inside the minds of the commanders who are now navigating the most dangerous military flashpoint on Earth. Before we go any further, let's establish something critical. Prince Sultan Air Base is not just any military installation. Located approximately 80 kilometers southeast of Riyadh, this sprawling complex has been described by senior Pentagon officials as the single most strategically valuable air base in the entire Gulf region. It houses advanced fighter jets, surveillance drones, refueling aircraft, and the kind of command and control infrastructure that allows the United States to project lethal force from the Mediterranean Sea all the way to the Persian Gulf. It is, in short, the nerve center of American military power in the Middle East. And Iran just hit it. The attack unfolded with a precision and scale that sent shockwaves through every intelligence agency from Langley to London. Iranian forces, believed to be operating under the direct command of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, launched a barrage of ballistic missiles in a coordinated strike sequence that overwhelmed early warning systems and left defense analysts scrambling for answers. How did this happen? How did one of the most fortified military installations on the planet find itself in the crosshairs of an Iranian missile attack? And more critically, what happens next? Here is the first critical piece of intelligence you need to understand. In the weeks leading up to this attack, satellite imagery from multiple independent sources detected an unusual surge of activity at known IRGC missile storage facilities deep within Iranian territory. Transporter erector launchers, the mobile missile platforms that give Iran its devastating first strike capability, were repositioned under the cover of darkness. Supply convoys moved through routes that had previously been dormant for months. And yet, despite all of this, the attack still came as a shock. That tells you something terrifying about the sophistication of Iran's operational deception. These are not amateurs. These are battle-hardened military commanders who have spent decades preparing for exactly this moment. Now, let's talk about the missiles themselves, because this is where the story gets deeply alarming. Iran's ballistic missile arsenal is the largest and most diverse in the entire Middle East. The Islamic Republic has invested billions of dollars and decades of research into developing rockets capable of striking targets hundreds, even thousands of kilometers away with frightening accuracy. Among the weapons believed to have been used in this strike are variants of the Shahab-3, the Fateh 313, and potentially the Fateh hypersonic missile, a weapon that travels at speeds exceeding Mach 13 and is specifically designed to defeat the kind of missile defense systems deployed around Prince Sultan Air Base. If hypersonic weapons were indeed part of this strike package, it represents a catastrophic escalation in Iran's willingness to deploy its most advanced technology against American interests. Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal about the timeline of the attack is something that has not been widely reported, and it has massive implications for how this conflict could evolve in the coming days and weeks. Intelligence sources familiar with the matter indicate that the attack did not arrive without warning, but the warnings came too fast, too compressed for an effective defense to be mounted in time. This is the nightmare scenario that air defense planners have long feared: a saturation attack, designed not to punch through a single gap in the defense perimeter, but to flood it with so many incoming projectiles simultaneously that the interceptor systems simply run out of missiles before the attackers run out of targets. It is a strategy of overwhelming arithmetic, and on this night, it appears to have worked. Let us now consider the geopolitical dimension of this strike, because it extends far beyond the borders of Saudi Arabia and Iran. Prince Sultan Air Base is an American facility. United States military personnel are stationed there. American aircraft fly from its runways. American blood may have been spilled on its tarmac, and that changes everything. Under international law, under NATO doctrine, under every framework by which the United States has historically defined acts of war, a missile strike on a base where American troops are stationed is not a gray area. It is an act of aggression that demands a response. The question that every diplomat, every general, and every head of state is now asking in frantic emergency meetings is, what kind of response? Here is what you need to understand about Iran's strategic calculus. Tehran did not launch this strike without calculating the risks. Iran's supreme leadership has spent the past decade watching how the United States has responded to provocations across the globe. In Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Afghanistan, they have studied the patterns, they have noted the hesitations, and they have made a cold, calculated decision that the United States, at this particular moment in history, does not have the political will for another full-scale Middle Eastern war. They may be wrong, but that is the bet they are making. And understanding that bet is essential to understanding what comes next. Do not go anywhere, because in just a moment, we are going to walk through the exact sequence of events on the night of the attack, minute by minute, missile by missile, and reveal details that have not appeared anywhere else. But first, consider this. Multiple senior American officials have privately confirmed to defense journalists that the scale of this strike exceeded every threat assessment model that had been prepared for this scenario. In other words, Iran did something that the best minds in the American defense establishment said they could not or would not do. That revelation alone should terrify you, because if the threat models were wrong about this, what else are they wrong about? Let's go back to the timeline. In the hours before the strike, Prince Sultan Air Base was operating on an elevated threat posture, FPC on Bravo in U.S. military parlance, meaning that personnel were on heightened alert, but the base was not in lockdown. The radar systems were active. The Patriot missile batteries were armed. F-15 Strike Eagles were on strip alert, ready to scramble within minutes. By every conventional measure, the base was prepared, and then the first radar returns appeared on the screens. Not one or two contacts, dozens, streaking in from multiple vectors at velocities that outpaced the standard interception window. The officers in the Combat Operations Center had seconds, not minutes, to make decisions that would determine the survival of hundreds of military personnel and billions of dollars of irreplaceable military hardware. Here is where the story becomes a testament to both the heroism of those defenders and the terrifying capability of what they were up against. Patriot missile crews, working at a pace that defies human comprehension, began engaging incoming targets. Intercepts were achieved. Explosions lit the night sky above the Saudi desert in brilliant, terrible flashes. But a saturation attack is designed to kill through sheer volume. For every missile intercepted, Another kept flying. For every intercept that succeeded, the math of the attack demanded that some targets get through, and some did. The damage assessment that followed is still being compiled, but early reports suggest significant structural damage to at least 2 aircraft hangars, a communications relay facility, and a fuel storage complex. The human cost remains classified, but is believed to be significant. Now, here is the layer that most analysts are missing entirely. This attack does not exist in isolation. It is part of a broader Iranian strategic doctrine that has been unfolding in slow motion for nearly 2 decades. Iran's forward defense strategy, formulated after the American invasion of Iraq in 2003, is built on a simple but brilliant concept: push the battlefield away from Iranian soil by creating a constellation of proxy forces, military assets, and strike capabilities that stretch from the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf. Iran does not want to fight a conventional war against the United States. It wants to fight a war of attrition, of grinding pressure, of escalating costs, a war where America's technological superiority is neutralized by the sheer expense and political burden of sustaining a conflict against an adversary willing to absorb punishment and keep fighting. The missile strike on Prince Sultan Air Base is a dramatic escalation of this doctrine. It is Iran saying, with unmistakable clarity, that no asset, not even a fortress-grade American military base deep in Saudi territory, is beyond its reach. It is a message delivered not in diplomatic cables or through back-channel intermediaries, but in fire and smoke and the deafening thunder of ballistic missiles crossing international borders. It is a message meant to be heard not just in Riyadh and Washington, but in Tel Aviv, in London, in Brussels, in every capital where leaders are now recalculating their assumptions about Iranian power and Iranian willingness to use it. We need to talk about Saudi Arabia's position here because it is one of the most complex and dangerous elements of this entire equation. The kingdom has spent more than $100 billion on defense acquisitions over the past decade. It operates some of the most advanced air defense systems in the world, purchased at enormous expense from the United States and other Western partners. And yet, Prince Sultan Air Base, which sits on Saudi soil in the Saudi heartland, was struck. For the Saudi royal family, this is not merely a military setback. It is an existential humiliation. It is a demonstration to their population, to their rivals in the region, and to their American partners that the kingdom's defenses have a ceiling and that Iran knows exactly where that ceiling is. What happens inside the Saudi palace in the coming hours will shape the trajectory of this conflict as much as anything that happens in the Pentagon or in Tehran. Riyadh has options. It can choose to respond militarily, which risks triggering a full-scale regional war with potentially catastrophic consequences. It can choose to rely on its American security guarantee, placing the burden of retaliation on Washington. Or it can choose to pursue a diplomatic off-ramp, a path that would be seen by many as weakness, but that might be the only route to preventing a conflict that could engulf the entire region in flames. There are no good options. There are only choices with different categories of consequences, and the clock is ticking. Let's pull back the lens even further because the global dimensions of this crisis are already beginning to manifest. Oil markets are in freefall. The price of crude has spiked by double digits in after-hours trading, with analysts warning of potential supply disruptions that could push prices to levels not seen since the energy crisis of the 1970s. Financial markets in Asia have opened in chaos, with panic selling spreading from Tokyo to Hong Kong to Singapore. Emergency sessions have been convened at the United Nations Security Council, where the United States, France, and the United Kingdom are pushing for a strongly worded resolution condemning the attack, a resolution that Russia and China are expected to veto, deepening the paralysis of the international community at precisely the moment when unified action is most needed. Here is the intelligence angle that should concern you most deeply. In the aftermath of any major military strike, there is an intelligence void, a period of hours or days during which neither side has complete clarity on what happened, what the damage is, or what the other side's next move will be. This intelligence void is historically the most dangerous period in any military confrontation because it is precisely when miscalculation becomes most likely. A commander who believes his strike has already provoked a counterstrike may order a preemptive follow-up before learning that no counterstrike was coming. A political leader operating on faulty damage assessments may authorize an escalation that would not be warranted by the true picture on the ground. In the fog that follows a strike of this magnitude, the probability of catastrophic miscalculation rises to levels that should make every person on this planet deeply, viscerally afraid. And yet, this is also the moment, as dark and terrifying as it is, where history has sometimes turned, where the phone calls happen, where the back-channel diplomats earn their keep, where the carefully cultivated personal relationships between generals who have met at conferences and exchanged business cards suddenly become the fragile wire on which the peace of nations balances. Every military officer with experience in crisis management will tell you the same thing. The 48 hours after a major strike are simultaneously the most dangerous and the most important window for preventing catastrophic escalation. What happens in those 48 hours will define not just the fate of Saudi Arabia and Iran, but the security architecture of the entire Middle East for a generation. Let's address what Iran says its justification is, because understanding adversary motivation is not the same as condoning adversary action. Tehran has spent months publicly condemning what it describes as the aggressive military posture of the United States and Saudi Arabia in the Gulf. Iranian state media has repeatedly pointed to American naval deployments, joint military exercises, and what it characterizes as economic warfare through sanctions as provocations that demanded a military response. Whether you accept these characterizations or not, they matter, because they tell you how Iran's leadership is framing this action to its own population and to the international community. Tehran is not acting randomly. It is acting according to a narrative it has carefully constructed over months and years. And that narrative has domestic political consequences that will constrain the options available to Iranian leaders, even as they seek to manage the international blowback from this attack. The role of Iran's proxy network in the aftermath of this strike cannot be overstated. Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthi movement in Yemen, various militia factions in Iraq, Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. These are not independent actors. They are nodes in a coordinated military network that Iran can activate, coordinate, or restrain depending on its strategic objectives. In the hours following the strike on Prince Sultan Air Base, intercepts of communications traffic between Iranian commanders and their proxy partners suggest that all of these networks have been placed on heightened readiness. This is the architecture of Iran's deterrence theory made visible, the implicit message that any American or Saudi military response will trigger a multi-front escalation across the entire region simultaneously. It is a doctrine of mutually assured regional destruction, and it is designed to give pause to anyone contemplating a conventional military response. We are now approaching the most critical phase of this analysis, because beyond the immediate military and diplomatic fallout, the strike on Prince Sultan Air Base raises a question that goes to the heart of global security in the 21st century. We are living through a period in which the rules-based international order, the system of norms, treaties, and institutions that has governed state behavior since 1945, is under unprecedented stress. Major powers are openly challenging the boundaries of acceptable state behavior. The taboo against striking military installations in third countries, once a cornerstone of the post-World War II security order, is eroding. And once such taboos erode, they are almost never restored. The strike on Prince Sultan Air Base is not just a military event. It is a data point in the larger story of how the world is changing and how the institutions designed to prevent catastrophic conflict between nations are struggling to adapt. Here is your final intelligence briefing before we close. According to defense analysts monitoring Iranian military communications, this strike was not the last arrow in Tehran's quiver. Satellite imagery acquired in the past 72 hours shows that at least 2 additional ballistic missile launch complexes in western Iran remain armed and on operational standby. Iranian naval forces in the Strait of Hormuz have been observed taking up positions consistent with a blockade posture. And IRGC drone units along the Iraqi border have gone to elevated readiness. This is not a one-off act. This is a campaign. Tehran has pulled the trigger once, gouged the response, and is now watching with cold, calculating patience to see what the world does next. And the world's answer to that question will determine whether this is the beginning of a managed crisis or the opening chapter of something far, far worse. This is the moment when history holds its breath. Every decision made in the next 72 hours in Washington, in Riyadh, in Tehran, in Moscow, in Beijing, carries consequences that will echo for decades. The men and women in those war rooms and those situation rooms are carrying a weight that most of us can barely imagine. And somewhere in the desert of Saudi Arabia, soldiers who signed up to serve their countries are dealing with the physical, psychological, and moral reality of what it means when a ballistic missile strikes the ground beneath your feet. This is not an abstraction. This is not a game. This is the bleeding edge of human history, and you are watching it unfold in real time. So what do you do with this knowledge? You stay informed. You pay attention. You do not let the enormity of these events numb you into passivity, because in a world where information is a weapon and where the narratives that nations tell about themselves and their enemies shape the decisions that lead to war or peace, an informed and critically thinking public is not just a civic ideal, it is a strategic necessity. The world needs people who refuse to look away, who demand accuracy over drama, who understand that behind every missile fired and every base struck, there are human beings whose lives have been irreversibly altered. Be one of those people. If this report has given you something to think about, if it has added depth to your understanding of one of the most consequential military events in recent history, then do not sit on that. Share this video, send it to someone who needs to understand what is happening in the Middle East right now. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so that when the next development breaks, and it will break soon, you are the first to know. Leave your analysis in the comments below. Tell us what you think comes next. Tell us which country you think blinks first. Tell us whether you believe this escalates or de-escalates. Your perspective matters, and this community is built on informed, passionate debate. Stay sharp, stay vigilant, stay alert, because the world is changing fast, and in times like these, the most dangerous thing you can be is uninformed.